Mitchell has been an inmate at Maxwell Federal Prison Camp for just over 6 months. He had very little to say when he arrived in June, except that it was nice to be back in Alabama. Since his imprisonment, Mitchell has declined all media attempts to interview him about his role in the Watergate cover-ups, his life as U.S. Attorney General, his time in prison, or anything else. Mitchell says he needs surgery for a hip problem, and federal officials have granted him a medical furlough to seek treatment. But he must return to Maxwell Prison Camp on or before January 15th, according to the new prison superintendent, Charles Beaver. Lawyers for the former U.S. Attorney General had asked Federal Judge John Sirica in Washington to let their client out of prison for good to seek medical attention, but the furlough that begins tomorrow was all that could be allowed. After January 15th, Mitchell will have to return to Maxwell to the federal prison often referred to as the Country Club. Maxwell Federal Prison is a minimum security facility with fishing lakes, a miniature golf course, and hobby shops. Mitchell is assigned as a clerk on duty rosters. Depending on the outcome of medical tests and any subsequent medical attention, Mitchell could be eligible for parole next June. Tomorrow's temporary release at the prison's front door is expected to be observed by a large number of local and national newsmen as Mitchell appears within camera view for the first time in over 6 months. Dick Bird, WSFA TV News.
It was bitterly cold and 7 a.m. when Mitchell, accompanied by former U.S. Attorney Ira DeMint and a local policeman, left the prison camp, which has been his home for the past 6 months. Mitchell was wearing only a suit and looking relaxed when he walked to DeMint's car, while fellow inmates waved goodbye to the man who once was at the pinnacle of power in the United States. Mitchell also waved, and when asked for comment by newsmen, he said, "It's a beautiful day." That comment was not unlike the one Mitchell gave to reporters when he arrived here 6 months ago on June 22nd. He then said, "It's a beautiful day to be in Alabama."
The man where are you taking Mr. Mitchell now?
To the airport.
The furlough is expected to last at least 2 weeks so that doctors can determine what must be done to correct an arthritic condition affecting a hip joint. Mitchell's original attempt to win a medical furlough was turned down, but now a complete determination of his condition can be made by doctors. Even though Mitchell is complaining of hip trouble, he showed no noticeable limp when he walked to Ira DeMent's car, but several inmates say he does walk with a limp inside the prison camp. Former Attorney General John Mitchell is expected to report back to this camp by January 15th. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the Maxwell Prison Camp.
Testimony was to have begun at 10 a.m., but photographers were in the grand jury room before the session began. Their presence caused Attorney Charles Porter, representing Governor Wallace's brother Gerald, to delay the hearing. Judge Joseph Phelps, who is hearing the divorce case, was called in to straighten out the matter. Phelps had earlier ruled testimony on the financial affairs of the divorce principals would be open to the public, even though testimony on actual divorce charges must be private. But today, Judge Phelps cited the new judicial article that cameras could only be in the courtroom if all sides involved agreed. After a lengthy discussion of the presence of photographers, the testimony began with reporters but not photographers in the room. It was pointed out as the hearing got underway, photographers who had only been present to record scenes of the participants prior to the start of the testimony and were not intending on staying in the room during the hearing. Once underway, the governor's brother Gerald testified he had not been in business with George Wallace directly or indirectly since the governor took office nearly 15 years ago. Gerald Wallace said he has not divided any legal fees or given the governor any money from any source since 1963. On advice from his attorney, Gerald Wallace refused to answer questions about American Credit Life, which Gerald represents as a lawyer. Gerald said that would violate the attorney-client relationship. But one of Mrs. Wallace's attorneys, John Cohn, protested that the information was pertinent to the governor's finances because American Credit Life does business with banks in Alabama, and the governor has a say over how much state money is deposited in the banks. Cohn indicated he would ask Judge Phelps to compel Gerald Wallace to answer questions about American Life. In other testimony, Gerald said he terminated the law partnership with George Wallace in 1963, but conceded the firm is still listed as Wallace & Wallace to get the benefits of its reputation. Gerald said other law firms do the same thing, even though in some instances all the original partners are dead. Questions also came up about campaign funds from George Wallace's races for governor and president in 1962, 64, 66, 68, 70, 72, and 76. Gerald was asked by another attorney for Cornelia Wallace, Ira DeMent, if he knew what happened to any surplus funds from the campaigns. Gerald said although he was assigned to supervise funds and see to it that money was deposited in the 1968 campaign, he had no official title in any campaign, and repeatedly said he had no idea about specifics of such funds. However, Gerald did say under questioning that he did see 117 suitcases filled with cash during the 1968 campaign collected in the campaign. When asked about the use of the money, Gerald said he assumes it was all spent in the campaign. More testimony into financial matters surrounding the governor are expected. Dick Bird, WSFA TV News.
It was a three-alarm fire that spread through the northeast wing of the shopping center. Firemen thought it was a one-alarm blaze, and they thought they had it under control. But the fire flared up again and ended up being a three-alarm situation. It took firefighters more than an hour to bring the blaze under control, but fire and smoke had already caused serious damage to 10 of the center's stores. As cleanup operations continued today, Montgomery Fire Chief James Odom assessed the damage and supervised the search for the cause of the fire.
Well, we've got very severe damage in the Joy's restaurant and in the bakery there. The buildings on each side has moderate damage from smoke and water, and the shops beyond that have smoke damage.
Have you been able to determine what caused this fire?
At this time, we hadn't. We've got it narrowed down between the restaurant and the bakery. It seemed like the fire started in the attic or around in that area on the separating wall between the two businesses.
Do you have any indication as to what the dollar damage is here?
At this point, we don't. It'll run in excess of $200,000, though. We've got some roof damage that it's going to be pretty expensive.
Fire Chief Odom said today until last night's blaze, commercial fire insurance rates in Montgomery were among the lowest in the country, but that the blaze that hit here has changed all that now. The city's fire insurance rates are determined by the annual number of fires and damage caused by those blazes. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
Indiana's 6'5" forward Mike Woodson hit on a jumper from the left corner for the first basket of the game. The Hoosiers held the hot hand and rang up the first 8 points. Indiana and the Florida Gators came into the championship with identical 7-1 records, but the difference was number 22, Wayne Radford, a 200-pound senior who wound up the leading scorer with 21 points. As Coach Bobby Knight watched calmly, the defense let a few backdoor layups slip in as number 42, Malcolm Cesar, led the Florida attack. Knight's team looked a far cry better from last year's, which finished with a 14-13 record, and more like the national champs of 1976 as Mike Woodson drilled home a 20-footer. Indiana's 9-point halftime lead dwindled momentarily as a Florida surge pulled the Gators to within 2. Woodson was on the bench in foul trouble, so the weight fell on the shoulders of number 22, and Wayne Radford, who besides leading all scorers, was named the tournament's most valuable player. Florida, despite encouragement from a near-capacity crowd of 9,000, could not overtake the Hoosiers. The final score read Indiana 73, Florida 16. St. Bonaventure won the consolation game with an easy 103-75 victory over Jacksonville University. As for the Gator Bowl champs, Indiana now moves into the Big Ten portion of its schedule, sporting an 8-1 record. This is Nick Bashton for NBC News in Jacksonville, Florida.
What are you running for next year?
Governor.
Are you going to do it? Now, when you say something like running for governor of Alabama, who is your potential opposition? I mean, George is not going to go again, is he?
No, he can't. The Constitution won't let you succeed yourself more than once.
Mm-hmm. And, of course, his wife won't be running in his place this time.
No. There'll be 5 guys in the race, 5 major candidates, and probably several minor candidates.
How do you stand with George Wallace? Is he a fan of yours?
We get along pretty good. He's been, I tell you, our office would have had to have shut down if it hadn't been for his help. The legislature's tried to gut us on our budget every time, and Governor Wallace, come to our rescue. He helped us on this, he turned the state planes over to us on this bombing investigation, and let us go all over the country rounding up these witnesses and things.
Mm-hmm. That's surprising, because it would seem that you two are poles apart politically.
Well, philosophically, we certainly don't agree on everything, but personally, I'm very fond of it. And I think it's mutual.
Who else, if anyone, are you going after in connection with that bombing?
Well, we got several others that they were, more. We'll get 3 or possibly 4 others for direct involvement in it, and maybe some others for indirect involvement.
Does the name J.B. Stoner mean anything?
Yeah, we got him indicted. We're trying to get him back to try him on another bombing. Now, this is not related to the one where the 4 little girls were killed, but we're trying to get him extradited from Georgia. We've got him indicted on a 1958 bombing of a church, a black church that was a focal point of some of the civil rights movements there in Birmingham. That it was bombed at night. No one was injured, but we have an indictment against him. We're trying to bring him back for trial. Now, he's the most dangerous racist in America. He's also a nut. He's a sick man.
How so?
Oh, he's just insane. He back in World War II.
Is this the gentleman who is the president or founder of the National States Rights Party or something like that?
Right. He
publishes a magazine called the Thunderbolt.
Yeah.
Marietta, Georgia.
Right.
Yeah.
Last couple of months, it's been mostly devoted to me. But back in World War II, he was 16 years old, and he was on. The Germans had him on the on their shortwave beaming out. He was making statements, favorable to Hitler back in World War II. He's a nut, real nut, sick man. We're trying hard to get him extradited. Georgia hadn't let us have him yet. The governors of Georgia has signed extradition, but we can't get him out of his local county over there. But he's a dangerous man.
I don't understand why you can't. If the Georgia governor has signed the papers waiving extradition, why can he not?
I don't understand it either, but he's gone in court there in his home county, in Marietta, in Cobb County, and has gotten a judge to issue an order preventing him from going back. Now, it should be routine. We should have had him back and gone ahead and almost been involved in the trial by now. We're almost to the point where if we don't get him in the next few days, we're thinking about just dismissing that particular case in that county and withdrawing our warrants over there, and then send the warrants to every surrounding county and every surrounding state around Georgia. And forget about trying him. That'll confine him to that county the rest of his life, and at least that'll be a blessing to every other locality in the United States, because if he crosses the county line, then we'll hopefully get him in another court where they won't be playing games with him.
If you say that you describe him, to use your word, sick man, he's got some problems, maybe he ought to undergo some kind of psychiatric examination.
Sure he
maybe
should.
He could
Sure
enter
he
a
should.
plea of...
Oh, if he entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, he could beat us, because he could prove that he's insane. He's a...
You know, of course, that we'll be hearing from Mr. Stoner. He will desire to fly over the state of Alabama on the way to California to respond to what you've said here today.
Well, if he comes out here, we may have a warrant waiting for him. Maybe easier to get him from California than it is from Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
When John Mitchell arrived here last summer, some inmates greeted him with bulls and catcalls. Others said they expected the former Attorney General to be given special treatment, and they expected him to be aloof and unfriendly. They had already formed negative opinions of Mitchell. When he left on medical furlough, there was an affectionate wave by Mitchell to fellow inmates, and they returned the gesture. Apparently, inmates here have come to admire John Mitchell, and the man has become very popular among the convicted gamblers, car thieves, and moonshiners at the Maxwell prison camp. John Yarmish is serving a year and a day for federal gambling conspiracy. He is from New York State. Yarmish says John Mitchell is well liked by prison camp inmates and that the Watergate conspirator has been unselfish, cordial, and spends most of his spare time helping other inmates with their legal problems.
He was an excellent fellow. Everybody seemed to like him. He helped everyone here. I think that since he left, it's a little gloomy. A lot of people missed him. I certainly missed him. He gave a lot of his own time to help different inmates with different problems. He never said no to anyone. He tried to help them with their legal problems, give them advice on them. And he was a sociable man, spoke to everyone. People that were denied parole, he tried to help them when they wrote the appeals for the parole. And there was a lot of inmates here that actually don't have any attorneys to help them, so they had to do it on their own, and he would help them with all the technical work and words.
How did he do this? Did he do this during regular working hours, or did he find time for it after regular work hours here at the camp?
He'd done all this on his own time, usually in the evening or during his lunch hours, and after the camp was done with their regular schedules.
What have you heard other inmates here at the Maxwell Federal Prison Camp say about John Mitchell?
The majority of the inmates all had praise for Mr. Mitchell.
Did he ever mention former President Richard Nixon or the Watergate scandal?
No, he didn't talk about the scandal at Watergate. I know he's always mentioned, he talked about Mr. Nixon, what good shape he was in, that he was shooting good golf these days, and he was relaxed and looked like he was getting better from his, I think it was his leg problems he had. And he was surprised that he was so active for his age.
Did he ever make any comments on why Mr. Nixon was not indicted and sent to prison?
No, he never made any comments into that respect.
Did you ever know of anybody asking him his impressions of what happened to him and what happened to the president?
No, he never mentioned anything about that.
Have you ever had a personal conversation with John Mitchell? And if you have, what did you talk about?
Well, I've talked to John about the good living up in the northern areas, and actually I spoke to him about my family because I have a large family and I have a child that's paralyzed, and we talked about different things, but mostly we tried to talk about the Watergate, but he never wanted to talk too much about the Watergate. We had an inmate in camp whose father had died, and the inmate had no money to receive a ticket to fly home, and Mr. Mitchell, with his generosity, donated the flight ticket so the inmate could go home to see his father buried. And he volunteered to do this on his own, which was very nice.
John Mitchell is scheduled to return to the prison camp on January 18th. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News, at the federal prison camp at Maxwell Air Force Base.
We're asking in the suit that the attorneys filed for the Civil Liberties Union that the city's policy of searching random searches at rock concerts and other kinds of concerts and at other public facilities be declared illegal by the court. We're asking for an injunctive relief.
Why do you feel that those searches were illegal?
Why do I feel they were illegal? Because the Fourth Amendment says that without probable cause and without warrants, people just can't be searched like that.
Were there, besides just the fact that you say they were illegal, was there anything that, besides just a normal search, that you were aware of?
Well, I was concerned that, you know, male police officers were patting down young girls and women. Also that there apparently were some dogs on leash that looked pretty ferocious. I think the fact that a lot of the police were wearing riot gear was frightening to a number of people. The search itself was humiliating. There were some people who were roughed up and you know, slightly hurt. I haven't heard of any real serious injuries.
Has this type of a case been tried in other cities?
Yes, I think there have been 3 cases that have come up in other federal jurisdictions.
And how did those come out?
They came out in favor of the plaintiff against the city or the county agency.
The governor has agreed to pay his wife a lump sum of $75,000. George Wallace has also agreed to pay the First Lady's $2,500 in bills The governor has agreed to pay his wife a lump sum of $75,000, and he's also agreed to pay $2,500 in bills incurred during their marriage. Other bills, according to the agreement, will be paid by Cornelia Wallace. The governor's attorneys already have copies of the bills Wallace have agreed to pay. Another part of the agreement gives a lot on Lake Martin to Mrs. Wallace. The governor is to give her a quick claim deed to that property on Lake Martin and to claim no interest in that lot according to the agreement reached today. Any other property, according to the agreement, owned jointly by the Wallaces will be left to Governor Wallace. Among the items divided by the couple includes some wedding gifts. It went to Mrs. Wallace: a portable television set, microwave oven, a Chantilly punch bowl set, and a Jean Lake painting and a French inlaid clock. Informed sources told us today that the settlement reached today, about 30 minutes before the scheduled hearing was to begin, was made by Governor Wallace more than 4 months ago. Those same sources also say Mrs. Wallace had originally wanted approximately $250,000 in an agreement. That agreement comes on the 7th wedding anniversary of the Wallaces. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the Montgomery County Courthouse.
2 hours after the out-of-court settlement was announced, Governor Wallace called a news conference in his office. The governor had no prepared statement. Instead, he fielded questions from reporters, both national and local. Wallace became emotional at times, like when he said he and Cornelia Wallace would still be good friends.
Are there any hard feelings between you and your estranged wife?
I do not believe so, and I certainly hope not. In fact, I would say no.
Considering your financial worth, do you think this was a fair settlement that was announced today?
Well, I accepted the recommendations of my attorneys, and the matter's settled, and I, of course, wish her well, because there certainly are no hard feelings. I regret it, of course.
What do you think there are any ramifications to the divorce and to the investigation or the court inquiry into your financial affairs on your probable upcoming political race?
I cannot judge that. I would think not. They were pretty thoroughly aired.
How do you think the divorce and the publicity that's preceded will affect your future political career?
I cannot say how anything like that will affect it. I'm not worried about that. I was worried about the private, personal relationship between myself and my family, which I regret. And I've said not one disparaging word about my wife, and don't intend to do so. My former wife, and I do not intend to do so.
Governor, did you prefer an out-of-court settlement to going to a possible trial as was scheduled for today?
I think that both of us preferred to settle the matter instead of going through a trial, having all you folks looking in and a private, personal matter, because after all, when people have been married, regardless of how long. It's something really that belongs to them, and I don't think they would like to have it aired before the world. The personal, private matters of a marriage. And for that reason, I think a settlement was in order, since we both would like to settle the matter, and we did it in a friendly manner. I think that's the way it ought to be. And my wife and I, in my judgment, are still friends.
He refused to discuss whether he would consider remarriage. According to one of Governor Wallace's attorneys, the divorce will become official in 60 days. From the governor's office, this is Dave Rickey, WSFA TV News, reporting.
The first legislative session of 1978 is underway. The House gavel sounded at 4:06. Governor George Wallace wants the state legislature to resolve an unemployment compensation problem by next Tuesday. He has asked the lawmakers to bring the state's unemployment law into compliance with federal regulations so the state will not have to forfeit more than $20 million in federal money. Employers face the possibility of losing many more millions of dollars in tax credits if the state fails to meet a January 31st deadline. A compromise plan has been ironed out on the unemployment issue, which gives school cafeteria workers and bus drivers a pay raise and hospitalization benefits. It makes them ineligible for unemployment benefits during the summer vacation months. Governor Wallace has provided in his budget a $500 annual raise for the support personnel and another $247 to pay hospitalization insurance.
And I just want to make it clear to each of you in this House that I have never attempted to usurp your prerogative of voting and make any agreement for any member of this House, which I did not in these meetings, but I merely tried to help resolve a measure and an issue that was as serious and as important as I think the unemployment compensation bill is, and the serious nature of this particular session that we're in. But if there's any question in any of your minds that I might have tried to reach an agreement for you without your vote and your prerogative that you have as a member of this legislature, I want to dispel that because I did not.
The legislature wrestled with the unemployment problem last year, but no bill was passed when the Alabama Education Association and AEA opponents fought over unemployment coverage for support personnel. The bill died in conference committee the last night of the regular session. It was reintroduced in a special session, but failed. The state is currently under a 30-day grace period after the federal government said it was willing to look the other way if the state passes the UC law by the end of the month. It makes it retroactive to January the 1st. The unemployment compensation issue has been isolated from the regular session, which begins next Tuesday, in hopes that it won't get bogged down with other legislation and miss the January 31st deadline of complying with federal regulations. From the state capitol, George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
To make a statement or so that maybe some is an extra misunderstanding of. As you recall, earlier in December,
I think they're using a defense mechanism to try to defeat this particular resolution. In other words, what you're telling me, every resolution I have, that you're going to have to be sent to the Rules Committee.
Late in November, the governor asked several of us to try to meet and resolve the differences in this unemployment compensation.
give up a night on a rock show, we may be able to get a convention or some other type event into the building, but I'll have to admit that rock shows have been one of our better revenue makers. There's no question about that.
Any kind of an estimate on how much money the Civic Center and the city could stand to lose?
I don't have any estimate on that at this time. I've not looked at any figures to try to come up with any kind of thing of that sort, but we haven't had that many rock shows. We've been averaging, what, 1, maybe 2 a month at the most since we've opened.
But you would consider that to be probably your biggest money maker?
Well, on a one-night event, certainly they have been our largest revenue maker.
Okay, what about the promoters?
Of course, I haven't talked to any of the promoters other than the one that was here the night that it happened, and he seemed agreeable at that time to come back into the building, so I don't think that they might skip us for a while, but I think they would come back.
He wasn't upset because of what had happened?
Well, I can't speak for him, but he told me then he would be willing to book another show at the time, so I can't say whether he was upset or not. I'm sure he wasn't overjoyed, possibly, but I don't think he was all that upset.
What are your feelings on the matter? This is more or less your Civic Center. Do you think that the searches were valid?
Well, I don't think I should comment on that at this time. It's not my Civic Center, let me answer that. It is the city of Montgomery's and the people of Montgomery's, and it is in the courts, and I think for me to say anything now would not be correct or right.
Bar Association President Hornsby called the court modernization plan brought about by the unified court system a success, but he refuted what he calls misrepresentation being aired about the new system. Hornsby then said the new unified system is the only meaningful improvement in Alabama's governmental process in his lifetime. He then defended the system.
We have seen court congestion in our appellate courts totally disappear. Where it once took as long as 3 years for an appeal to be decided, it is done today in 6 to 9 months. In spite of heavy caseload increases, the 3 state appellate courts have been totally current with their dockets for the past 4 years. This accomplishment, of which no other state judiciary can boast, is nothing short of remarkable. One state newspaper has called it as remarkable a feat as balancing the national budget. The trial courts of our state have also effectively combated the problem of congestion and are currently disposing of more cases than are filed each year. During a 4-year period through January 1, 1975, there was a 16% reduction of the pending criminal cases statewide, in spite of a 48% increase in filings during the same period. In civil and equity cases, there was a reduction of over 11% in the number of pending cases in spite of a 29% increase in filings. I'm also confident that the judges of no other state can equal this remarkable achievement. The heart and soul of improvements which have been accomplished within our courts has been the institution of effective administration and the insertion of business-like methods of accountability into the system. The Department of Court Management, or as it's called today, the State Administrative Offices of Courts, are today on the road toward managing this multi-headed governmental monster by the use of very simple business procedures. Procedures such as expense accounting to determine and justify expenditures, computerized caseload reporting, which provides the capability to detect problems and promptly utilize the judicial manpower available, and court planning, which can lay the future blueprint to provide adequate judicial service for the state. There is no court congestion in Montgomery County today. You can get to trial within 90 days in a criminal case or a civil case. And gentlemen, I doubt that there's very few states or counties in this country that can boast of that accomplishment. Justice is being served in this state, and the people of Montgomery County and of the state of Alabama are being well served by the justice system.
Hornsby also told Exchange Club members unless the Alabama legislature stops using judges' salaries and compensation as a political tool, efforts to recruit competent judges for the state's circuit court benches will find more and more difficulty. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.